Dear friends, dear friends, dear friends, this is Deepak Chopra, and I'm trying a new experiment. I'm coming to you live right now using a new technology. I am using my computer today, and I have set up a, a studio in my home in California. And I'm going to be using this. I'm going to show you a few different glimpses of my studio and the space I'm in. But I am so thrilled to be able to speak to you right now using this new technology. So bear with me. I'm adjusting some things right now, adjusting the lights and so on. But I'm going to continue in our conversation on the spiritual solutions to the COVID crisis. And I think I should preface this by saying that when I say spiritual, I don't mean religious ideology or dogma or philosophy. I don't mean scientific constructs. I mean true spiritual experience, experiential knowledge of source, experiential understanding of our true identity, and how that can actually help us achieve peace in this time and also, in fact, evoke the healing process as well. So, some of you might not relate to what I'm saying. Some of you might think of it as pseudoscience, or as my critics have frequently said, profound pseudo-scientific bullshit, etc., etc. So, if any of what I say either offends you or annoys you, then feel free to leave this conversation or criticize me or condemn me or whatever else comes to you spontaneously. So, with that caveat, I'd like to start. This is part two of the spiritual solutions during the COVID 19 epidemic and beyond, part two. I will continue with this series for a while, unless there's no interest. I will definitely continue with this series for a while with all of you and uh, see where it goes. So, when I say spiritual, I mean the source of all experience, which is also the source of existence, because existence is the experience of existence. And experience is not possible unless we are conscious beings, because all experience occurs in consciousness, is known in consciousness, is understood in consciousness, and ultimately it's made out of consciousness. All experience is modified consciousness. So, as I embark on this conversation with you, what I'd like to continue to maintain is that when I use this word spirit or the word self or the word source or the word fundamental reality or the word pure awareness or witnessing awareness, all those terms are pretty, pretty synonymous. I notice that you are here supporting what I'm saying. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mar. Thank you, Gabriella Wright. Thank you, Robin Kemp. Thank you, Jamal. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, David. So let's proceed with our deeper understanding of what we really mean by source And of course, it means different things to different people depending on your worldview, philosophical worldview, religious worldview, scientific worldview, mathematical worldview, so many ways to interpret what I'm saying. So I have to be very careful. What I'm saying is very precise and may or may not uh, agree with your worldview or your science or your philosophy or your religion. So, if we go to the scientific worldview right now, and you look at what cosmologists and mathematicians and theoretical physicists are saying about the nature of the universe, they will say to you that the universe is the manifestation of force fields, particles, atoms, and gravity. And what science is looking for right now is what is called the Holy Grail, which is the unified field theory of existence of the universe. And currently, and by the way, that Holy Grail, the unified field theory, was a quest of Einstein as well. He was unable to come up with a unified field theory, although he tried right to the last moments of his life. So currently, the scientific worldview identifies four fundamental forces in the universe. The first is electromagnetism, electromagnetic fields. We are using these electromagnetic fields right now to communicate with each other on the internet and in cyberspace. So, electromagnetism is one of the four fundamental forces. The second force is referred to as the strong force or the strong interaction. And this is a force postulated by physicists which holds the quarks that are part of the atom. The nucleus of the atom is made of quarks, which are positively charged particles, and of course, neutrons. So, quarks give rise to protons, and then neutrons and protons make atoms. So, the force that holds these quarks together is referred to as the strong force. That's the second force. The third force in nature, as understood by the scientific constructs we have of reality, is the weak interaction or the weak force. And the weak force is responsible for what is called radioactive decay. So the strong force, the weak force, the electromagnetic force are three fundamental forces. And according to current science, current theoretical physics, mathematical models, those three forces, strong force, weak force, electromagnetic force, are the same force in different forms. The fourth force is gravity. And gravity somehow has not been unified at the moment with the other three forces. And many people feel it may never be because it's not a force in the regular sense. Rather, gravity is the curvature of space time and is responsible for the planets spinning on their axis as well as going around the sun, their sun, etc., etc. So, gravity being the curvature of space time may be a separate force altogether, although there are attempts right now to unify quantum physics with grand unified theories of relativity, the grand theory of, or you might say, the general theory of relativity. Sorry, I meant the general theory of relativity. There's an attempt to unify these forces, and many people are also talking about quantum loop gravity. Unless you're a theoretical physicist, these fundamental laws of nature, as they are called, are actually very difficult to understand unless you're a specialist in physics or mathematics or theoretical physics. But in any case, these are the basis of what scientists call the laws of nature. Now, from a spiritual perspective, from a consciousness perspective, that which we call the laws of nature are actually regularities of experience in consciousness. So, what we call the laws of nature: the sun rises every morning in the east, sets every evening on the west. We know that's because the earth is spinning on its axis, and that's due to the law of gravity, etc., etc. So the laws of nature are actually the regularities of experience and knowing in human consciousness in the way we describe them. In the way we describe them. Those regularities of experience, we presume, are experienced by other biological organisms as well, not just human beings, but other biological species. So, horseshoe crabs that live at the bottom of the ocean where there is complete darkness, they've never seen the light of the sun or the moon, they'll still come out on a full moon night to lay eggs and basically give rise to the next generation. The full moon that they can't see, the light that they cannot experience, and yet something is being experienced as a regularity, seasonal and circadian, in every biological organism, including plants and bacteria. I don't know about viruses, but definitely in most microorganisms, there are regularities of experience. Even plants, they move towards the sun and they move away from darkness, and they search for light as its nutrition for photosynthesis, absorb carbon dioxide, and mix it with light to create sugar. Photosynthesis, which is the basis of all the energy, including the energy I'm using right now to speak to you. So, regularities of experience in consciousness are what we call the laws of nature. And in the spiritual traditions of the East and the wisdom traditions of Vedanta and non dualism and Kashmir Shaivism and even certain aspects of Buddhism, the source of all this experience is what is referred to as pure consciousness. So, pure consciousness, which is consciousness not yet conditioned as the mind, as the fragmented, separate ego mind, pure consciousness is the source of all experience. And all experience in biological organisms, and I'm right now referring mainly to the human biological organism, but similar to all our organisms, but especially mammals, all experience occurs in the form of sensations in the body or perceptions, perceptual activity, which is a sophisticated form of sensation, or images, imagination, or feelings, thoughts, or feelings, thoughts, and emotions. So I've said this many times. The formula is SIFT, SIFT, sensations, which includes sense perceptions, images, feelings, and thoughts. That's all we experience. The rest is a story. The rest is a philosophical story, a religious story, a scientific story, a mathematical story, etc. Our experience is sensations, perceptions, images, feelings, thoughts. And all of these are modified forms of consciousness modifying itself into a particular experience, Now, sense perceptions and sensations, with our eyes open, we call the physical world and the physical body. But the same sensations and the movement of those sensations um, um, at a more subtle level, we call thoughts and emotions. But they're all vibrations of consciousness. Consciousness vibrates in a subtle form as thoughts and emotions, and in a more gross form as the physical body and the universe. So in Vedanta, Ayurveda, we call this the subtle body and the physical body, which includes the physical body of the universe. But the source is always pure consciousness. And mind, body, brain, perception, universe are modifications of that consciousness. They are symbolic representations of existence. And pure existence is pure consciousness, pure knowing, um, pure awareness, the source. And you might say the ultimate unified field, because the unified field of scientists excludes consciousness, doesn't even talk about consciousness, even though the theoretical constructs of the unified field, like force fields and gravity, strong and weak interactions, all of that, all those constructs are in consciousness alone. Where else could they be? So, consciousness, pure consciousness, is the ultimate unified field. Now, about 40 years ago, when I was a student and a disciple of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who is my spiritual master, the great sage seer who brought transcendental meditation and made mantra meditation popular in the world, brought transcendental meditation and made mantra meditation popular in the world. Maharishi, with a group of physicists, mathematicians, scientists, biologists, asked the scientists to identify the qualities of pure consciousness or pure awareness before it modifies itself into experience, which then we translate into constructs called natural laws. Okay, so what I'm sharing with you in this series, and I will continue to share in this series, if you want me to, these qualities of the unified field and pure consciousness, and why there is practical um, uh, impact on our health and well-being by knowing our source, which is the spiritual solution to not only the COVID crisis but all crises in general, everywhere, all the time that humans face. It is to get in touch and have experiential knowledge of the source of all existence. So, looking at my notes, and I typed them out from 40 years ago, looking right now at the 25 qualities of the unified field, the field of all possibilities, as originally formulated by my master and my guru, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the great seer, the great sage, who brought mantra meditation and popularized it all over the world, amongst others, of course. But these principles are understood in all the great non dual traditions. So today I'm only going to talk about the first quality of the unified field. And then, if you like, we can continue this conversation and create a whole series on understanding pure consciousness, the qualities of the unified field, how to get in touch with it, how to abide in it, how to rest in it, how to be aware in it, and how to actually harness the power of our own source for the problems of existence as we see them through the fragmented human mind, including the classic causes of existential suffering, the fear of old age, infirmity, death, and so on. And of course, all those existential anxieties get even more magnified right now as we are facing the COVID-19 crisis. Okay, so what's the first quality of the unified field? And I'm going to actually share with you both that first quality and a little glimpse into how to get in touch with it, how to abide in it, and also maybe use a mantra to solidify it. Okay, to solidify the experience. So, the first quality of the unified field in my notes is what is called the total potential of natural law, which means that the source, pure consciousness, is the total potential for all the laws of nature, for all the regularities of experience, for all the symbolic representations of these laws as the electromagnetic forces, strong weak interactions, gravity, however you construct your framework, scientific, theological, or otherwise. Pure consciousness is the source of all experience, of all regularities of experience, and therefore all the scientific constructs that we call natural laws or the laws of nature. And those laws of nature are governing everything in the universe from atom to galaxy, from particle to atom to your biological system to the ecosystem outside us. Here's a little glimpse into the ecosystem out of my window. You can see the ocean in the back. You can see those beautiful trees. You can see them swaying in the wind, the biosphere. So, that biosphere is also an expression of the laws of nature. And what we are saying is that those laws of nature have their source in pure consciousness, which is the total potential for everything, the immeasurable potential of all that was, all that is, and that all that will be. Immeasurable, timeless. And that source is spaceless, it's timeless, it's borderless, it's formless, it's infinite, and it is self regulating itself through what we call natural laws, which I've explained. So I'm not going to spend more time explaining natural laws. But the source of all existence is also the source of all that we call the laws of nature, which we uh, theoretically give constructs to based on the regularities of experience, which are sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts. Sounds very repetitious. Sounds very kind of abstract. But what I want to say to you right now is it's also very practical, especially right now when we're seeing this huge epidemic of, um, of what we can call inappropriate inflammation, inappropriate compromisation of our immune system, because somehow that self regulation is out of whack. Somehow, that self regulation, which exists at every level, particle, atoms, molecules, biological systems, ecosystems, and biosphere, and the entire universe. It's all self regulating. Today's fashionable word is cybernetics. Cybernetics is the science of self regulation, both in machines and biological organisms, but also in ecosystems. And it's obvious that our ecosystem is out of whack right now with climate change, with extinction of certain species, with war and terrorism and social and financial injustice and conflict and religious conflict, ideological conflict, even conflict among scientific worldviews. Our ecosystem, self organizing, is out of whack. So we need to get in touch and experience our source in order to reestablish what we call the integrity or the balance or the fine tuning of the ecosystem, which ultimately translates into the fine tuning of our inflammatory responses. Too much inflammation that causes physiological havoc, inflammatory storms, chronic inflammation, chronic disease, inappropriate, too little inflammation, again, leads to lack of homeostasis and self regulation. So everything has to be fine tuned, not too aggressive, not too under responsive. If your immune system is over aggressive, it can give rise to autoimmune illness, cytokine storms, and allergies. If your immune system is under responsive, uh, maybe you're more likely to get infections. And also, some people suggest that cancer is a result of an under responsive immune surveillance system. But when the immune system, the endocrine system, the whole biological organism is self regulating, it is fine tuned, neither aggressive nor under responsive, then you have self-regulation, cybernetic feedback loops sustain health, well-being, joy, equanimity, peace of mind, but also that becomes the basis then for insight, for intuition, for inspiration, for creativity, for a higher vision, and ultimately for transcendence and enlightenment. Now, enlightenment is a far out concept, especially in the middle of this pandemic crisis. So, for now, we will maybe forsake that aspiration, although we'll bring it back later. But for now, let's just be practical into how to be in touch with our own source. And the simplest way to be in touch with our own source is to understand that the source of all experience is in between every experience. Once again, the source of all experience is in between every experience. So let's say the experience is thought. I'm thinking of my mother. Next thought. I'm thinking of the Empire State Building. And the source of this thought and this thought is the space between thoughts. Simple. Okay, so there's a gap between every thought. But there's also a gap between every perception. So look at an object there and then look at an object there. What you're doing is you're shifting from one perceptual activity to another perceptual activity, and there's a gap between that. And it's the same gap as the gap between thoughts. And it's the same gap between images. So imagine a beautiful sunset on the ocean. Now imagine watching a snow-capped mountain. So beautiful sunset on the ocean image, another image, snow-capped mountain, and in between is you, the source of that image and that image. Okay. Same thing with emotions. You have an emotion of fear, you have an emotion of love. In between, there's the gap, the source. The mystery is in the gap between sensations, the gap between perceptions, the gap between images, the gap between emotions, the gap between perceptions, the gap between you and me, the gap between my hands, the gap between the breath, the gap between any experience is the same gap. And all these experiences are entangled with each other, which means they're in superposition with each other till one of them actually happens. One of them actually happens. So the gap is the gap between any experience, any sensation, any thought is actually the source. And it then modifies itself into the experience as well. So, first lesson, experiential knowledge of the gap. Do that right now. As you're listening to me, just be aware of that which is listening. As you're looking at me, be aware of that which is looking. And that still presence you feel is the gap. Or just close your eyes right now and say to yourself, I wonder what my next thought is going to be. Ask yourself that question and wait. There is silence until a thought comes. That silence is the gap. Or be aware of the gap between the in breath and the out breath, and then between the out breath and the and the in breath, that's the gap. Or think of one image and then another image, and then before you evoke the third image, pause, and then evoke a third image. That's the gap. Very easy to get into the gap. And once you get into the gap, then you are at the source. Now, of course, there are many other techniques, okay? Mantras and sutras and mindful awareness of perceptual experience, mindful awareness of bodily sensations, of emotions, of the web of relationship, of the ecosystem, of the universe, and mindful awareness of being aware. We'll go into these slowly, but right now, just understand that the gap between experience is the source. And in the experience also is the source modifying itself symbolically as the experience, whether the experience is what we call the mind, body, or the universe. And once you get there and you abide there and you rest there, then you're one with the total potential of natural law, one with the regularities of experience that we call the cosmos, the ecosystem, the biosphere, the biological organisms, the atoms, the molecules, everything self regulating. So, this is one key. Right today, first, get in touch with the total potential of natural law, which is right there in your own being as your own being. You don't have to look for it, it is the one that is looking. You don't have to look for it because, as I said, it is the one that is looking. It's not the scenery, it's the sphere. It's not that which is observed or the process of observation, but the observer. It's the silent witnessing awareness behind every scenery as the scenery is born and dies in every moment that it is experienced. But this source, spaceless, timeless, causeless, acausal, non-local, quantum mechanical interrelatedness, the immeasurable potential of all that was, is, and will be, formless, infinite, is you. Now, we can give it names: God, the divine, Ein Sof, Allah, Brahman, doesn't matter. It's one source that is responsible for all experience in every species, even though the experiences are different and the interpretations of these experiences are different. So today, get in touch with yourself by slipping into the gap. And as you slip into the gap, now I'm going to give you a mantra. The mantra is Shivoham. I am pure consciousness. I am pure being. I am pure knowing. I am pure awareness. You can skip all those additions and just say I am. In the New Testament, when you read the Gospel of John, might not be totally accurate, but somewhat. The Gospel of John says, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the light. But I am doesn't refer to the persona of Jesus. I am refers to the pure source, pure consciousness, in which Jesus is a person as a process expressing the source. I and the Father are one. I and the Mother are one. I and you are one, whatever way you want to say it. But I am is aham, is shivoham. I am. So the mantra for today, shivoham. Anytime today you feel even the slightest bit of distress, slip into the gap, the source, and anchor it with the experience, shivoham. the state of perfect self regulation, cybernetic feedback loops, and the correlation of all these feedback loops with every other feedback loop in a state of fine tuning of the immune system, the inflammatory responses, the prevention of cytokine storms, and whatever else that we associate with the disruption of the self regulating ability of our biological organism that makes us susceptible to disease. Now, if you think this is pseudoscientific bullshit, so be it. But no harm trying. Okay, no harm trying. Going to the source of all experience, abiding in that source, anchoring it with the mantra, Shivoham, and see what happens. See if that brings you peace, if that brings you equanimity, if that brings you calm, if your body feels joyous, if your body feels quiet, if your body feels borderless, if your body feels boundless, if you experience lightness of being, and if that brings joy to you, then you're on your way to being holy and to being healed. So, thank you very much. Shivo Hum. I am.